This video is going to be a little bit different. If you've seen my Can Manjaro replace Windows or Can Linux Mint replace Windows videos, then you might notice this. But for those of you who are new here, my goal is to find Linux distributions that could potentially replace Windows for beginners, specifically for beginners. However, different Linux distributions have different quirks. Now, tech-savvy people might not have a problem with this and might be able to easily overlook these quirks, but beginners, not so much. See, for those who have used Windows their entire lives and only use computers in basic ways, changing operating systems is a really big deal. So if they're going to leave their comfort zone, it needs to be a smooth ride. But all of these quirks might be like pebbles on the road. And enough pebbles makes for a bumpy ride, and even more pebbles can lead to roadblocks, meaning that beginners will go back to their comfort zones, being Windows. So as you might already be able to tell by the title of this video, and how I've begun this video, Ubuntu has a few pebbles on the road. And this is the big difference between this video and the other videos. I'm not aiming this video to be like a tutorial. If you insist on following along, then you can watch my try before you buy video to get your Ventor USB set up. But if you've heeded my warning, then sit back, relax, and let's get into it. Searching for Ubuntu is fairly easy. Ubuntu has been an absolute staple of the Linux distribution scene since it was first created. So your search engine should know exactly what you're looking for when you type in Ubuntu. But here's our first big roadblock. If you watched my Linux Mint video, you might have noticed that I alluded to this a little bit. On the front page, and no cookie notices. You'll find out later why no cookie notices is important when we look at some other distros. One of the worst designs in the modern web is this type of cookies notice. Consider the alternatives. When we installed Manjaro and Mint and went to their respective web pages, they didn't have any cookie notices. That's my ideal scenario, but I understand that some websites really want cookies. So how about a pop-up in the bottom left or the bottom right at the bottom of the screen? Anywhere else. That's the lesser of two evils here, but that's not what Ubuntu does. Here we get a massive pop-up in the middle of the screen, darkening the rest of the screen, pulling all of our focus to the cookies notice, and we can't interact with the rest of the web page. So we have to make a decision. So let's say that I value my privacy and I would like to reject cookies. If I click on that button, I get another page with another accept button at the very top, and I have to scroll all the way to the bottom to get to the closest thing we have to a reject button, because essential cookies have to be enabled. So we're not off to a great start. And any distribution that did this, heck, any website that did this, if I was reviewing websites, they would all lose marks for this. This is bad design through and through, and it is designed to be manipulative. So I don't appreciate it. If I was newly switching to Linux for privacy reasons, then this would make me really question whether I was making the right decision. But onto the download page, regardless of whether you're installing on a desktop or a laptop, you want the desktop version. Now we get to pick from two versions of Ubuntu. Unlike Manjaro and Mint, we're not picking between different desktop environments. Here we're picking between the LTS version, long-term support, or the cutting-edge version. Both desktop environments will be extremely similar. So if you want the ultimate stability, everything has been run through tests vigorously, then you want the LTS version. Practically, this would be for people who want to install this operating system once and leave it for a few years and never touch it. But if you want cutting edge, you want the newest of the new, then you would go with this other version. The newest version has obviously the newest software, but with the newest software can come the occasional bug or two. So your mileage may vary. It's up to you which version you're going to pick. For me, Ubuntu is not going to be installed for very long, so I'm going to pick the newest cutting edge version. At first glance, if you're not reading the webpage properly, you might think that you need to sign up to this newsletter in order to download Ubuntu. But it does say clearly there on the left that Ubuntu should be downloading. and it's downloading for me, so you don't need to sign up to anything. Next up, as I specified earlier, I'm not doing this as a tutorial this time, so this next section will go a lot quicker. Once Ubuntu has downloaded, I'm going to transfer it to my Ventoy USB. Eject the USB, put the USB in the computer I want to install Ubuntu on, turn on the computer, press delete while it's booting up to stop it from booting into whatever operating system was there before, enter the BIOS, go to boot override, boot into Ventoy. And then once I'm there, I will select Ubuntu and normal mode is perfectly fine. It's not obvious at first glance here, but Ubuntu has actually booted into its try before you buy or live USB mode, meaning that if you were to close this install window, the desktop would appear as normal and you could give it a try for how the operating system and desktop environment feel. But we're going all the way here. We're going to install Ubuntu properly and see what the rest of the process is like. But be warned, you're going to want to buckle up for this because this is the longest install process we've encountered thus far. Language is self-explanatory, and I want to give the Ubuntu team props here for this accessibility menu. I don't need any of these accessibility options myself, but I absolutely appreciate wherever accessibility options appear in anything I'm using for those who do need them. And the default keyboard layout is perfect for me. Now here's a very interesting menu. I suppose we could file this under the Windows can't do this section because we're being asked whether or not we want to connect to the internet. Last time I checked, last time I heard, Windows 11 absolutely refuses to install without internet because they want you to sign into your Microsoft account. So they'd never put a do not connect to the internet button there. This leads me to believe that we could continue this install process offline if we wanted to, which is great, and I will validate that claim probably at a later date. But for now, we're connecting with the internet. As for the next window, I want you to keep this in the back of your mind for reference later on in this video. We're being asked if we want to update the installer, which is what we're using now. I downloaded this and installed it on the exact same day, so I'm not sure why we need to update it if it's a fresh download. But it's giving me the option to skip it, so I'm going to skip it. Next, we get the official prompt as to whether we want to just try Ubuntu or install it properly. That's pretty handy because, as I mentioned, we can't see the taskbar or the dock anyway here, so it's not apparently obvious that this is the proper desktop. Next, we have options for automated installation. This isn't a beginner thing at all, but absolutely great for power users or slightly more advanced users who need to install Ubuntu on a lot of systems. As for the apps, I just want the essentials. I will pick and choose what I want to install and download from the software center later on. I'll also be skipping proprietary software as I normally do. I want to erase this disk entirely for the most simple, straightforward installation of an operating system. No partitioning, no separate SSDs. You have the option to do it if you'd like. If you watch my other videos, you'll know that I'm going to tell you to back up your data, but again, this isn't a tutorial. After selecting the SSD, we get an option for encryption, which is nice, and then we get to the local account section. And we still aren't done with the setup process after this. Your computer's name is how your home network will see your PC. This is also a local account, and we have the option to log in automatically, two things that Windows 11 absolutely cannot do out of the box. And then finally, time zone and a review page to make sure that we've selected all the right settings. So that was about 15 pages of menus to get through that process. Both Manjaro and Mint seem to do all of that in a much streamlined process, such as connecting to the internet, which was automatic. Again, I'm curious to see what they do when there's no internet, whether they can install offline. But we'll come back to that in another video. Speaking of which, Ubuntu will lose marks for the install process, as it does appear to require an internet connection. This is strange for 3 reasons. Firstly, you might remember that I said I didn't want to update the installer. So if it was updating the installer, then why did I get the option? But I suspect that's not exactly what it's doing. Secondly, the size of the ISO file, the file that I dragged from my desktop to the Ventoy USB, that is the largest ISO file of the 3 operating systems here. So what I would assume in that situation is that Ubuntu has everything it needs in this ISO file to install, and it shouldn't need much more from the internet. And lastly, requiring an internet connection in your install process could potentially be dangerous for first impressions. I did this install process twice, one with fast internet and one with artificially slowed down internet. The fast internet version was about 10 minutes, that's pretty good, but if you slow down the internet, it can start to sneak up to about an hour. And not everyone has fast internet, not even in 2025. If you have seen the Mint video, you'll note that Mint also downloaded some stuff from the internet too. And it gave me the option to skip, but the skip button didn't work for me. I still appreciate having that button, and I also said that Mint's install process would probably be shorter than the 20 minutes it took me if it didn't need to connect to the internet. Now we can leave the live USB version and boot into the proper operating system by restarting our PC. Before I click that button though, notice that it says we're ready to use. I'm going to revisit that claim in a moment. After our restart, we get a welcome screen, much like Mint and Manjaro, except this one is a couple more pages. If you're using this PC for personal use and you are installing this for privacy reasons, you definitely want to opt out of this. I do appreciate that they've given us the option, and I also appreciate that they're probably not pulling a Windows and stealing all of that data, regardless of which option we picked in the menu anyway. Then we get a notice for the App Center and we're done. Or are we? Let's go to our settings. Let's check out the usual stops. We're going to right click on the desktop and go to display settings. This is specifically for people using a 4K screen. 200 works on my 4K screens. I'm using 1080p, so we're going to stick to 100. This settings menu has all of our settings. You can see the rest of them in the left-hand column. So as usual, next up for me is dark mode, which is under appearance. So far, things appear to be going well. Now, a little quirk of Ubuntu is that they default their taskbar or dock to the left-hand side of the screen. Personally, I don't like this, but it's up to you, and as with most things with Linux, you get a choice. So I'm going to put mine at the bottom of the screen. To do that, I need the Ubuntu desktop menu inside of settings right here. Then under the dock section, I want the position on screen. And here's our next big roadblock. A big, fat update pop-up right in the middle of the screen, taking my focus away from the window I was just at and stopping me dead in my tracks. Let's do a little bit of revision. Remember when I said to keep the update installer window in the back of your mind? Well, if you're putting a pop-up in the middle of the screen, I don't really feel like I have much of a choice now, do I? Do you remember how Mint told us we had updates? A notification in the taskbar on the bottom right. Manjaro wasn't this intrusive out of the box either. So why in the middle? The update notification could have been here, 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 or here. And it didn't have to take away focus from the window I was already in. This is the exact sort of thing I left Windows for. Freedom and choice. And this is just as Windows decided that you don't get to choose when your Microsoft Store apps update anymore. They're just going to force you to do it anyway. So I guess I'd better update. The password is the same that I put in the installation process. And then we'll wait for these updates to get out of the way so we can continue using our computer the way we want to use it. Oh, but wait, no, we're not done. We have a prompt to restart. Remember that final screen in the install process that said we're ready to go? Doesn't feel like it was being honest. But let's break this down because this might not seem like a big deal to you. Except if you were using your computer for something else more important. Sure, it's annoying when I'm in the settings menu, but it's more annoying that it happened after a fresh boot. And what if I was doing anything else? What if you're a creative using Blender and you're really in your zone, really in your workflow, creating a 3D model or doing an animation, and then this pops up? What if you're writing a document or in a spreadsheet or any other sort of work where you need to be laser focused? The operating system just told you that whatever you're doing is unimportant and that you need to stop and listen to it right now. Are updates important to do? Yes, absolutely. Do they need to be done as soon as the operating system tells you they need to be done? No, never, not at all. And if I was in the middle of any more important task here, then the last thing I want to do is shut down that task and restart my computer. So let's restart and get back into it. Maybe now we're ready to go. At least they're not doing full page ads telling us to use Microsoft's recommended browser settings when we come back into the operating system though. So it's time to get Steam installed. We're going to go to the Software Center, and oddly enough, there are more updates here. This is starting to feel a little bit too close to Windows 10 and 11, where there are always endless updates everywhere you look. And when I do these updates, they fail. It's a bit confusing to say these applications can't be updated while I'm using them because I just freshly booted. It must be an update for the store we're currently in then, but you can see how that's another pebble on the road for a beginner, but at least we don't need to restart again. Now, let's finally go and install Steam. Searching for Steam is easy, and we see Steam there with a big tick mark right next to it. So you'd think that all we have to do is click install, right? Hold your horses there for a second. This is the Snap version of Steam. You might remember in my first video that there are 3 package formats that are designed to work on every single distribution: Flatpaks, app images, and snaps. Ubuntu went all in on snaps. And it's not that they would prefer that you use snaps, it's that they are almost aggressively bullying you to use snaps. I'll back up that claim in just a moment. A beginner wouldn't have a clue about any of this and just install the Snap version of Steam. But Valve doesn't support the Snap version of Steam. And if you check with the community to see what they have to say about the Snap version of Steam, it's not good. What this really boils down to is if you have a problem with the Snap version of Steam and you tell Valve about it, they can't do anything for you. So let's go and install the official version of Steam, which I would like to install through Ubuntu's Software Center, but I don't have the option to do that because this is snaps only. So let's go to the Steam website and click install, just like we would on Windows. This is going to download a .deb file. This is the predecessor to Flatpaks, app images, and snaps, and still widely used. The .deb stands for Debian because this is a Debian-based distro, meaning that .deb files will work on any Debian-based distros that you want to use them all, such as Mint. So that's just going to download to our downloads folder. And getting to our downloads folder is just as easy as Windows or Mac. It's the folder icon in the dock. Easy peasy. There it is on the side. Downloads, exact same position as Windows and Mac. And just like both of those operating systems, all we need to do is double click, or at least we would if this wasn't Ubuntu, because Ubuntu is now telling us that they don't like this version of Steam. Remember when I said aggressive bullying? So what I can understand from this is that Ubuntu would prefer that I use the unofficial version of Steam, unsupported by Valve, being the Snap version, and potentially have problems and a worse experience, then use the official version of Steam, which I downloaded from the Steam website. And just the icing on the cake here, when we do this install process, we end up needing to use a terminal. If you remember my Is Linux Hard to Use video, you'd remember that I am not using a terminal for anything, because a beginner shouldn't be expected to use a terminal, and there are plenty of distributions where you don't need to use a terminal. So unfortunately, this is an absolute fail. I can't tell if this is a Valve thing or an Ubuntu thing, but it is a roadblock because this isn't a passive terminal as we've seen in the past. You have to interact with this terminal. So this is where I stopped. There are enough pebbles on the road that I think this would be a massive roadblock for beginners, and they would likely go right back to their comfort zone, potentially being Windows, when there are so many other great distros out there that are super easy to use and won't pull any of these shenanigans. As I understand it, Ubuntu is aimed more for enterprise solutions, thus the install with an automated script on multiple computers, and I've seen plenty of power users and advanced users using Ubuntu as well. So it does have a purpose. However, would I recommend it for beginners as a replacement for Windows? Not at this time. Things might change in the future, but for now, I would recommend other distributions. So if you're looking for a super easy Linux distribution to use out of the box, I'd skip Ubuntu for now.